Hey there, welcome on to this week's episode on Life Skills Academy, where we're talking about the growth versus fixed mindset. My name's Dave Donoghue, and I'm joined by Gavin Burke. So, Gav, we're going to get into this right away. You shared a document inside our school community on this very
Yeah.
topic. So, we're just going to chat about a few of the points on it. So, the first thing, the growth versus fixed mindset. So, the key distinction in your mind on growth versus fixed, how would you define it?
Well, so I guess the first thing to say that it's a useful model, and is, I suppose the idea that we can lean into challenges is obviously something very familiar, and parents have heard a lot about that. I think down through the years since it's come out. The fixed mindset is obviously, when we don't want to lean into a challenge, and we can recognize that, parents recognize that, we recognize that. So I think it's a useful model to show two poles. But I suppose things have evolved, and we can go a lot further than that, Dave.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair enough. And let's just say sometimes in the literature and sometimes in the presentations online, there's a lot made about the growth mindset is everything and that the fixed mindset is bad. And the reality of times is, like it said in the document, is that your child does not have to have one mindset.
Does not have one mindset.
No.
Yeah. So the thing about it is that, the growth mindset is a symptom of something. The fixed mindset is a symptom of something. But if I asked you, Dave, if I asked two different people, let's call it to lean into, to use the language, two different challenges, why is it that one person can do it and the other person can't? And then is the other person, do they have just a fixed mindset? Do they just need to change their mindset? Do the other person have a growth mindset? Are they just born with a growth mindset? Are they so I suppose that's the trick. Is in, sometimes I kind of feel like it's like telling someone to go and drive a car who's never driven before and say, just drive it, go on, just drive it, and showing them how to drive the car. When you show someone how to have a growth mindset, when you have a process to show them how to do it, to enable them how to do it, to take them step by step through it, a growth mindset naturally occurs. A fixed mindset doesn't occur necessarily efficiently if I don't know how to do it. I might just be lucky. And we can explain how I might be lucky as well as this conversation evolves.
Excellent. Because, speaking of kids in schools, I'm sure you would have seen it too in school. Like back when we were in school, and you see it nowadays still, some child could have a growth mindset when it comes to academia and ace tests or rise to the challenge. Whereas
Yeah.
another child might show zero interest in that particular topic or subject,
Absolutely.
but then put them on a sports field and they suddenly can adapt to challenges, they rise to challenges, and it all varies. So what's underneath the hood of all that?
So in a word, it's meaning. So there's a lovely little phrase I think that was put in the document. It's not, so I'll read it here. It's because difference is not just mindset, it's meaning. And I think the real thing to understand here, when we say meaning, it sounds a bit fluffy. Would you agree with that, Dave? If I say to you meaning, and this is the first time you've heard someone say this, you're like, oh yeah, okay, meaning, I know what that means. But how is that specific? How is that scientific?
Yeah.
But when I actually say to you, well, then meaning is a symptom of something very specific and something very scientific, now automatically you go, oh, okay, tell me how. So meaning is a symptom of alignment with an individual's highest void value. So what does that mean? It effectively means that the brain perceives something as meaningful when it perceives it as really important for it. A brain perceives something that is important if it perceived that something is missing. In its point of view, that's heavily missing. So, for example, let's call it an adult, like in an everyday situation, if I perceived that a relationship was meaningfully missing from my life, I will value seeking a meaningful or a relationship. I will value it. But if another person doesn't have a relationship, but they don't really perceive it's missing, then they ain't going to value it. It's not going to be a priority. And I think what is really interesting to point out is that every single human being that's ever been born is driven by a hierarchy of priorities that the brain has. And it's like an operating system, and that your brain needs to be directional. It is directional. It's not just a blank slate. It's following a direction, and the direction is its highest values. And you either can be highly precise, know exactly what your void value is, or you can be unconscious to it, but it's still going to dictate your behavior either way. Does that clear, Dave?
Yeah, it is. So it's almost like a compass where the direction and where you'd have a lot of structure in your life. It's almost like the compass that drives you towards what's most meaningful. That am I on track
It,
there?
Absolutely. Let's even look at it. Let's even look at it neurologically. As soon as your brain senses or perceives that it's doing something that's fulfilling its highest priority, the blood, glucose, and oxygen goes to the prefrontal areas of the brain. Why? Because that's where that part of the brain enables us to have long-term vision. It enables us to look into the future, foresight, as we say, and create and plan and build a purpose, as opposed to the hindbrain, which only reacts from hindsight. Now, not to kind of go too deep into that, but there's actually something that actually happens in your mind when you're aligned with the brain's operating system, its highest value. And so to come back then to the growth mindset, then it's much it, it's much more useful to kind of go, okay, hold on a second. My child already has a growth mindset in the area of their highest value. Now, okay, cool. But what do I want to do with that if I'd like to get my child to have a growth mindset in maths in school, or friendships, or a bullying situation, or whatever the situation at hand that the child is showing a fixed mindset? So the first step of that is that the child will never have, or you will never have, Dave, you will never, ever be able to have a growth mindset in something when your brain perceives no connection to the thing at hand and your highest value. If there's no connection, you don't want to know about it, you'll drop into your amygdala because it'll be perceived as all bad and you'll run away from it. And no matter
Okay.
how much.
I'm going to jump in a
Yeah,
sec here, just for a sec.
yeah,
All good. All good. So when you say, and we'll just say you're saying here that, let's say, me or anybody, like, for example, with the growth mindset, they will not have that growth mindset if their brain does not make a link between what the situation is and their highest value. Now, could you list like 2 or 3 examples of a highest value? Because I know when we talk about labels, like values are thrown about everywhere nowadays, and it's like love, connection. But
yeah.
in a nutshell, what values are we talking about?
So we're talking about, when we say a value, we're talking about a priority. So, for example, I can give the priority, one of my priorities, one of my highest values would be speaking and talking and learning about human behavior principles. Okay, cool, right? But that value has come from a big void. From when I was younger, I perceived I didn't know a lot about myself. I wasn't sure about myself. I didn't feel comfortable in different areas. And I had a massive value in going, why don't I? Why don't I feel that? Who am I? What am I? And so that void drove a value, drove a priority for my brain to seek. That was its directional force. So now take that example. If you put two courses in front of me, one was a course on, take it, I don't know, give me something, tidying my bedroom. And another course was a sophisticated course on neurology and how it affects human behavior. My brain will automatically, because my brain goes, oh, how does that help me in human behavior and understand myself? My brain will automatically go, oh, the other course on tidying my room, my brain, even though my wife would love me to do it, my mom would have loved me to do it, my granny would have loved me to do it, it's just not, I'm not I'm not pulled to it. So, and if I try to, sorry, what? Yeah, it looks like you're right.
Yeah, just put a link into it, and correct me if I'm wrong. Then, if that same course was put in front of you and it showed a very compelling argument to say, listen, if you clean your room, if you can clean your room and keep it clean as a habit, it has all these benefits for those of you who are into human behavior that you may do the course. Is that a fair
Absolutely.
link?
Absolutely. And that's the next question, because parents always kind of, well, that's all well and good, but my child needs to do this. Like, that's fine. They may not like it, but they need to do it. So what our answer to that is absolutely. If that course that you outlined there can show me or can invite me into thinking that, whoa, this is actually going to give me some deep knowledge and self-understanding, suddenly I go, wow, how are they going to do that? And I'm going to look at it a little bit closer. And it's just because I've linked the activity at hand to my highest value void. And again, like we said before, a lot of parents, again, we all fall into this trap. We kind of go, well, I have to do stuff. And even though I have to do stuff I don't like doing, so my children have to learn. But when you actually look at it, and we did a video on this called Why You Actually Clean the Bathroom, you actually clean the bathroom not because it's inspiring for you to clean the bathroom, but because you have an unconscious or conscious link between cleaning the bathroom and how that serves your highest value. Maybe it's creating a harmonious home environment. Maybe it's creating a place of order that people can feel safe in, that they're not, tripping over stuff. But it will 100, if you do it disciplinedly, it will 100% be connected to one of your most important priorities in life. And without that information, Dave, we can huff and we can puff, but we will not show discipline, reliability, and focus in this area.
Mm. Yeah,
And
it's
another thing,
fascinating.
just on another point on that, I know the growth mindset, that model, what it does is it focuses a lot on the process, and it says, praise the process. And, don't praise someone, if, let's say you say a talented individual, a very intelligent, they say, don't praise the intelligence, praise the process. And that is definitely merits. But again, if I see, let's say, for example, I take tidying the room, if my wife says to me, well done, Gavin, you put your clothes in that wash basket over there, you folded your thing and put it back in there. Okay, cool. It might give me a little bit of a dopamine hit for one or two things, but my brain still sees no link between that process and my highest value. So another way of looking about that as well is that the process that we're looking, so for example, the hard work, the being disciplined, the focus, that process, the thing that we're meant to praise, again, it's just a symptom. If you see it, it's a symptomology that the person is doing something that is perceived highest value, or their brain has made a connection between highest value. And I think another thing worth, Dave, and you stop me talking here because I'll talk all day about it. But again, willpower is a very interesting bit to put back in here, because growth mindset and willpower and fixed mindset and no willpower often come into the same conversation. And it's worth noting that there's no such thing as willpower, really. It's not a trait. It's a symptomology that somebody is doing something that they perceive a means to the end. And if I have
Mm.
two people beside each other, the person that will have most willpower will be the person that perceives more means to the end. And they're the person that's going to be more disciplined, reliable, and focused. And it's as simple as that, really.
Mm. Yeah, that makes sense. It's fascinating. So, like, looking at it through the growth and fixed mindset in different environments, like when people tap into what their hierarchy values actually are, and that in effect comes with perception, how we view things through the lens in which we view them. So, for example, you could have 10 people walk through a shopping center, and depending on what they value, they may take interest in different things. Like, you may go to a bookstore and go to human behavior books. I may go to business books, and it's all values driven.
Absolutely. And at this point, Dave, I think it's worth, because I know if I'm listening to this, I'm kind of, okay, that's all well and good, but how do I find out my values? Do I just guess them? No. You can find your values very simply by observing someone. So if I know you, if I know my child, for example, all I do is I observe where they spend their energy. Now, mind you, there's a 13, Dr. John DiMartini came up with a 13 question process for this that we follow. It's exacting. You can do it in 3/4 of an hour. It's very, very precise. But even without that, if you know what you're looking for, how does someone spend their energy? What energizes them? How does someone spend their time? How does someone spend their money? What do people like to bring the conversation towards in social situations? What do they love to learn about? What inspires them? Look at what their behavior is telling you. Don't listen to what they say. If you ask them something, they tell you they value this, don't listen to it. Look at their behavior over a 3 to 4 month period of time and observe them, and you'll see where they're naturally pulled, and that will give you a very good idea of where their highest value lies. So, for example, it's Lego will give you, see your kid being pulled to Lego. It's not Lego, it's Lego for the sake of something else, and it's worth digging into that a little bit. I wonder, what is he getting? What's the meaning they're getting out of Lego? Because you can always find the for the sake of underneath the piece, especially with some of the older people, and especially teenagers, and then especially adults. You can always find that. It's not difficult at all.
Mm. It's worth digging into that,
If you
because
don't, yeah,
because there's so much literature that's very popular and that is in society that speaks about certain things, and when you see that the values are underlying all human
absolutely.
behavior, you can really go easy on yourself. And if you're
You
saying labeling yourself as having a fixed mindset over something, that you can dig in a little deeper, so you could link
understand it.
it. Mm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Everything is linkable. The first point is understanding that values drive the growth mindset. The second thing is going, oh, okay, I can link things that I have a fixed mindset, I can link my highest value to. That's the first step, meaning. Meaning is always the first step. And it's to understand that every single human being that's ever born, that's ever lived, and ever will live will have an equal growth mindset and fixed mindset. You'll be fixed in areas that you have no value and no interest in, and you'll have growth in areas that you're interested in. And then once you understand that, you're not shaming, because Dave, you see this in schools a lot of time when this conversation is had about growth mindset. Some of the kids know what they should do. They know they should lead into a challenge. They say other kids lean into the challenge and kind of go, oh, they have to be doing quite well now, but they can't do it. And suddenly they're
Mm.
like, why can't I have a growth mindset? He's able to do it. I know what I should do, but I can't do it. Why not? And this is where the neurology comes out. But if you understand that, and you can teach that, then you can understand, okay, what's going on here. There's a repair that's needed. We spoke, Dave, before about, and I think it's a nice way to think about it. You can repair the perception that leads to the fixed mindset. Now, when I hear the word repair, I think of something that's broken, and I also think that there's something that there's a solution to. Now, when we say broken, we mean that it's causing a certain reaction, a certain aversion, a certain avoidance. And once we see that, let's call it that avoidance, that aversion, that resentment, we know, okay, there's something we can repair here in order to help the child. This is what I talk about when we talk about teaching them how to drive the car. We can
Mm.
repair this perception. We can teach you how to repair the perception. You can do it yourself. And then once you've done that, you will naturally adapt to the situation at hand. I know that's kind of a lot of words and a lot of talk. How do you, I know, what's your feeling on that?
No, I think it gives great peace that when you see how it works and when you take the time, we're so busy nowadays, like when you take the time to find out what your hierarchy values is, and you realize why you do the things you do. And not only that, that you start to understand why other people do what they do and how you can coexist. And that
Absolutely.
underneath that, the perception, the lens, and if you're looking at something going, that person has a growth mindset and I don't in this. Not only that, if a drone was put over that person for 24 hours,
Absolutely.
we often make judgments and split second decisions on behavior we observe in a couple of seconds, and we don't see the person the rest of the day when they might appear if they have a fixed mindset somewhere else.
Absolutely. I think the next point on this, Dave. So meaning is the first step. So perceiving meaning in a challenge is the first step towards a growth mindset. But It's actually balancing the perception or repairing the perception wholly, which really allows someone to open the door. And let's say, if we say growth mindset allows you to adapt to a challenge, is that a fair thing to say, Dave? Would you kind of go, okay, if I was to kind of go, right, growth mindset, why do I want a growth mindset? Okay, well, it allows me to adapt to a challenge instead of the opposite, which is not to adapt to challenge and not want it and run away from it. Would that be a kind of a frame that makes sense?
Yeah, it does. And as the timekeeper for the call, we'll wrap it up in about 4 minutes.
Yeah,
Just so we're
perfect,
on
Dave.
it.
And we can continue on this next time a little bit more, because
100%.
but and this piece that we're going to go into next, again, it's on the document, the balance of a perception. This is really kind of how we talk about repair. So let's just say with that analogy. So you can only adapt to something if you don't have a massive avoidance desire for that particular activity. So for example, I am never going to, if you give me a maths paper to, or a maths exam or a maths subject to learn, if I can see no upsides, if I see no support in this challenge that you've given me, I'm going to drop into my amygdala or my systems one, and I'm going to want to, because the systems one basically runs away from prey and runs to predator. And that's where you get all that emotional. So anytime we have, let's call it an all good or an all bad, and Dave, we won't go into this too much, but it's worth mentioning here that if the perception that the child has or your teenager has is an all good and all bad, that is straight away you should be like, oh, all good, all bad. That's going to create a systems one reaction. They're going to want to avoid it like a predator and try to seek an immediate gratification to get around it. So then we have a process of repairing that perception through a basic or through a structured balancing process. And I know we spoke about it in the document. I don't know if you want to touch on it, like, you know, the two questions maybe on the basic balancing structure. Do you think we've time, or what do you want to do?
No, I don't think we've time, but we can link to a previous episode below, and the document as well will be in the community. Be a great one to dive into next time.
Yeah, absolutely. No, we can, yeah, because I think that balancing piece is like, again, you do a whole episode on that, the structure behind balancing in and of itself, you know.
Yeah, 100%. We could dive into that next time, definitely. So, everybody, thanks for listening and watching, depending on where you're checking this out. And if you want to hop into our community, we have a community for parents on school. It's free. And we also post videos in there along with some extra resources like this document we spoke about in this video. So, thanks for watching. Gav, we'll see you next week.
Thanks, guys. See you, Davey.
All right, cool.